Well, hello, good evening, hockey fans. Welcome back to the Hockey Writers Live. We have reached episode number 10. I am your host, Mark Scheig, and as you can see, we've got panelists on the board right off the bat here. So we're going to go with something a little bit different tonight just because of what we're about to do. And it's actually going to be probably our best show yet. But you'll see our three panelists here. We have Eugene Helfrick, who's our lightning writer. We have Matthew Zator, who we just announced is going to be taking over our prospects coverage here at the Hockey Writers. And we have Jim, apparently he's nicknamed the Pizza Man Parsons, from Edmonton, does a lot of our good work in our news department. Gentlemen, how are you all doing tonight?
Doing well.
Doing good.
Doing very well, thank you.
Good, great. We really appreciate you jumping in here. As I thought, tonight we're actually going to spend the first 40 minutes talking about where we're at with the season and kind of get your thoughts on that. And then after that, somewhere around 8:40 tonight, give or take a little bit depending, Columbus Blue Jackets forward Cam Atkinson is going to join the show. And we're going to have a lot of fun with him talking about how he and the team is preparing for the season. And then he's doing a bunch of stuff around Columbus, helping out the fans, helping out businesses. So we're really looking forward to that. So we're going to jump right in here, Eugene, with tonight's panel and the first question for you, which pretty much has to do with how close are we actually to playing hockey here? We're seeing different tweets, we're seeing different pieces of news about where we're at with the season and stuff, but it doesn't seem like that there's anything concrete. So is there anything that you can tell on how close we possibly are to seeing a hockey season get underway?
Kind of like all of 2020, it just feels so nebulous and uncertain. A week ago, I would have told you I was probably 80% positive we would have a season starting in January. And then over the course of last week, there's been a lot of back and forth. We're still kind of waiting on finalization of labor dispute stuff. And so, like I said, right now, I'm kind of more 50-50 on if it's going to start even by February, like they're hoping to. But then you also have the fact that teams are putting ice down. Teams are preparing like they're going to have a season. And the owners wouldn't be putting ice down without some confidence that there's going to be a season starting soon, because that's expensive. Especially, I know Nashville put theirs down a week ago, I think it was. That's expensive in the South to put ice down anytime. So,
Matt, are we close to a season in your mind?
I mean, I'm with Eugene with it. I mean, I thought there was going to be a season, and they keep saying January is still going to be, but I mean, we're now at 2nd of December, and there's still no concrete thing, decision on if we're going to have a season. And training camps would have to start in a few weeks for that to happen. And I'm on the 50-50 type probability right now, and it's going to be interesting to see what developments happen in the next couple of weeks. But I'm hopeful, but it's starting to get doubtful that it's going to happen in January.
Yeah, Jim, we don't even have a schedule yet. I mean, if they want to get this off and going in a month, they'd have to have everybody back. They'd have to be able to do it safely. I just feel like that there's just so many obstacles here. Are we missing something that they think they can still get going in January?
I would guess that there's probably a lot that isn't out there. There's a lot of information that's going on behind the scenes that isn't being talked about publicly for a couple of reasons. One, I would assume that the more information the NHL reveals, the more they have to stick to, which is not always a good plan. If you said something out there publicly and then you can't follow through with it, it doesn't look so good. So I'm going to guess things like the schedule, things like that. There's probably a lot of work done on that already. But that said, I think there's just so many things that are up in the air, whether it's, the COVID pandemic issues, whether it's travel, whether it's what arenas are, all that other stuff. I think there's just a lot they don't know. So everything they can control, they've probably worked on diligently, and it's all just kind of ready to roll out. My sense is that they're probably going to have a lot of things happen very quickly. For now, we're going to hear a lot of vague talk, a lot of it's going to seem like it's so far away. And then when things get sort of figured out, watch how quickly it's going to start to come together. That's my guess. But obviously I don't have any insider information because I'm not a fly on the wall in those meetings. But I would assume that they've worked on a lot of those X's and O's, and it's just a matter of rolling it out.
The reports that have been out there seem like indicate that there hasn't been a lot of talking and it's been very contentious, and that there was a period of time where the sides weren't talking, but now they seem like that they're slowly trying to get back together, and there might be some contentious arguments about the memorandum of understanding and just how the players want to proceed, how the league wants to proceed. Do you guys feel that there's a chance that they can kind of come to an agreement here in short order?
I would assume so for sure. Like, I just don't see a situation where either side is going to want to not play. I think the league knows how important it is to not only have the games and get the TV deal done that they've got done, and they need to get into the new one. And I think the players want to make some money. They don't want to sit out, no matter how little they might have to take on the discount side. So I think they all want to play. It's just a matter of, some of this stuff needs to iron itself out. And when it comes to the point where there's a deadline that they can't go past because you can't have a season if you go too far. I know that Matthew said, they're talking about January, but it might be February. Once you get to a certain point in February, it's too late. So as we get to that stage, we're going to see things move really quickly. And I would just guess both sides kind of go, you know what? We got to get it figured out. If we don't get it figured out, we're running the risk of not having a season here. And I don't think they want to do that. So I think it'll come together quick. It just might take a little longer. And I don't see a January 1st being realistic at all.
Eugene, can you put a number, a percentage on the chance that there's no season at all?
It depends. If its season gets started, it'll finish. Judging by like how the NFL in the MLB had their seasons where they had outbreaks, they had situations where they had shut teams down, but they still found a way to finish despite those setbacks. If the season is not started, like Jim said, by let's say early February, then yeah, I don't think it's happening either. So let's say about if it gets started, I'm gonna say it's finishing 100%. They'll find a way to power through. If it gets to be early January and numbers are to the point where it's not safe to have players on the ice or even trying to participate, I'd imagine they may have to punt on the year no matter how much they don't want to.
I guess the concern that I've got going here is we already know that a couple of teams that have been reported, the Vegas Golden Knights being one of them, the Columbus Blue Jackets being another one, where there have been some workouts, but there have been, I think, 4 players with Vegas and several players with the Blue Jackets that have caught COVID. And you just kind of wonder, what all does the league have to do in order to be able to let's face it, there's going to be COVID cases probably. I mean, it's widespread everywhere right now. There's no perfect approach. I'm going to make a football reference for a minute. Lamar Jackson, who plays for the Baltimore Ravens, didn't play in the game today. But the reason I'm bringing him up is because he said that he thought that he was doing everything right, and he still ended up catching it. So that's going to translate everywhere. And I feel like that, hockey players need to follow intense protocols, but who knows if they're going to be able to, find a way to, get the season going. Matt, do you think that, are we at 50-50 here? Is it just, the more I think about it, there's just so many hurdles that have to be overcome in order for them to be able to launch a season safely. And I think that that's the most important part here, is the safety of everybody involved. Do you think that there's a realistic chance that they're going to be able to do that, maybe even in a bubble setting?
Well, the thing is, there's so much going over, across Canada with the different restrictions, the different provinces having different restrictions and different things, and they're going to have to go over that. And that's what they're restricted by. Like here in BC, they've got so much travel restrictions and stuff to come in and out, and, mandatory masks in all the retail settings and, anywhere inside. And, you can't, and there's like Manitoba was, locked down there. And it's going to be really interesting to see if they can get through any of all these government hurdles they got to go through, not to mention the safety of the players. And like you said, they're getting it, even though they're doing all they can to prevent from getting it. And there's just so much that has to happen, unfortunately. And I think, like we said before, if it's not happening by early February, it's not going to happen. And that's what we want. We want it to be safely done, and we don't want players getting it widespread. So
and that's going to be the tricky part in this whole thing, because look at what's going on in football. We have postponed games. Give the NFL credit. They're kind of a model. Everyone's paying attention to the way that they're doing everything, and they haven't actually had to cancel a game yet. They've had to postpone a few games, but they haven't had to cancel. But I just wonder, in hockey, with having games potentially 3-4 times a week in a normal week, if all of a sudden a team has an outbreak, I just feel like that there's a lot of chaos involved. Jim, am I missing something? It just feels chaotic to do something like that, kind of like what the NFL has been doing.
I don't know that you're missing anything. I think there's probably going to be, as sad as this is going to be to say, there's probably going to be a level of acceptance as to how many people can get this pandemic, this disease, this virus, and I don't want to say don't care, because obviously they care, and they did a really good job in the bubble last in the playoffs and not have anybody get it. But I don't think it's realistic to assume that no one's going to catch this thing. So if they have a season, people are going to get sick. It's the quote or the number that they're willing to let people get sick before they have to go, okay, well, when's too many? When do we have to say, okay, well, your roster's too thin? That's why they're going to carry these taxi squads. There's all sorts of stuff going on. So yeah, I think if it's super uncontrollable and the numbers continue to rise like crazy and there's nothing they can do about it, then yes, everybody's in trouble, including all the other leagues, NFL, NBA, all that stuff is going to be affected by it. I would assume when it comes to things they can control, bubbles, hubs, arenas, fans, stuff like that, they'll play. They'll figure it out, and they'll be willing to sacrifice things that they might not be comfortable doing. They'll do it because they've proven they already can. It's just a matter of, can we travel? Can we do this? Can we go here? Can we actually go out? Can we practice? All that stuff. If they can't do any of those things, you're right. It becomes very difficult to pull off any kind of schedule, even though we know it's going to look drastically different than any regular season in the past.
Yep. Well, we're about 12 minutes after 8 o'clock here. So if you're just tuning in, this is the Hockey Writers Live. This is episode number 10. And we're here with the panel tonight talking about a potential start to the new season and what all has to happen. Again, make sure that you hit that like button on Facebook. Make sure you subscribe on YouTube so you don't miss a thing, because you'll be able to pick it up later during the week. So Matt, let's go to you for this one. So we've talked about all the different, chaotic challenges that we're facing here. What do you feel actually has to happen in terms, we saw what happened in the bubble. A lot of things had to happen, all kinds of testing, all sorts of protocols. What has to happen for a season to start? Do you feel that they have to replicate what they did in the bubble, or do they have to even go further?
I think they have to at least replicate what they did in the bubble. The problem is with the regular season, there's a lot more teams involved, and the playoffs, there was limited. I mean, they could do it. They could do one city or a couple cities and be fine. They're going to have to do a lot more in this one. And they, in the United States, there's a lot like there's been talk about the, an all Canadian division and 3 US divisions and hub cities, and talking about, that they play a round robin in a certain hub and then move on and have all the Canadian teams in there and doing that. That's feasible. But the thing is, I think the biggest thing is the travel restrictions. There has to be some of this lifted in some of these provinces. And, they're saying, Vancouver could be a hub city. Yeah, but BC has to lift some of the restrictions for that to happen. And I think that's the biggest thing, is the government restrictions. And if those aren't, at least loosened, and we know that NHL players are deemed essential workers, but there's still those hurdles that have to happen. And I think that they have to at least replicate the bubble. But like I said, there's a lot more factors than just the limited amount of teams that were in the playoffs.
And I think you bring up a really good point about the border. I know that there's always talk about, is it going to reopen? When is it going to reopen? I personally haven't heard anything. I know that they've kept extending when they're going to do it. Jim, what do you feel has to happen in order for, you're not going to get everybody to go across the border. We get that. But if you're talking about now who's an essential worker, and is an NHL player considered an essential worker, and if there's protocols in place, would they be able to go back and forth? Like, what has to happen in order for the border to, maybe loosen up some of the restrictions?
That's a difficult question to answer without more information about how bad or better the virus gets, right?
Yep.
If we don't know what's going to happen here in the next month or two, there's just really no way to know what the NHL can get away with, what they can do, how they can use things, what the government's going to be willing to do. Without any of that information, I guess we have to look at the worst case scenario, which is probably they're looking at bubble situations again, which is not what the NHL players want to do. They have absolutely no desire to spend an entire season in a bubble. They can do it. And I don't know if you asked a bunch of players in a survey if they'd be willing to do it, and then how many people would exclude themselves from the season if that was a choice. But I don't know. If you don't have a clue what the numbers are going to be like, and we don't know what they're going to be like in the middle of December, and we don't know if they're going to drop by January 1st, which is when they want to get things started. Yeah, like at the very least, you got to figure out what the format's going to be, where you're going to do it, what arenas you're going to play in. And that's long before February. So we've got about 2-3 weeks of what's happening with these numbers and what's happening with the border restrictions. And then we'll know. But I guess for the next couple of weeks, we're not going to know anything.
And Eugene, you're in an interesting spot in the United States down outside of Tampa. And I know, just reading what I've read, it seems like Florida tends to be known as being a lot more open than some places around the country. Just can you kind of give everybody a sense of what's going on down there? And could you ever see a scenario where either Amalie Arena or possibly down in Sunrise, if something like that were to happen, could you foresee them hosting like a regional bubble of some sort?
Yeah. So being in Florida here throughout the pandemic the entire time, we started out with a lockdown back in March, but by May we were opening up again, and our governor has pretty consistently said that we're going to stay open as much as possible. So I could totally see there being a situation where teams come to Florida to do a kind of like a state bubble, because there are a lot of facilities in Florida, especially near Tampa and near Sunrise. Like in Tampa, outside of where the Lightning play, there's a big center where a lot of the women's hockey teams for the Canadian, I believe the Canadian team and the U.S. team train there at different points throughout the last couple of years. So there's a lot of facilities there for hockey. So if they needed to bring, let's say, 5-6 teams in, they could, in theory, pull it off without too much of an issue as far as facilities go. Because, like I said, if it comes down to it, if the NHL came knocking, I can guarantee you Florida would say, sure, we'll take anyone you want here and we'll set them up, and we'll, do a situation where you can have hotels and have these blocks and do whatever you want with it. Because that's essentially what they did with Orlando for the basketball championship. And like I said, given by what we're currently being told across the state, we're full gears ahead, whether we want to be or not. That's kind of where we're at right now.
Matt, what is it like up in, as I know, we got a nice spread of people with Eugene being down in Florida, you're up in British Columbia. What is going on up in that general neck of the woods? And are you starting to see restrictions sort of being loosened up there, or not really?
They're being tightened. And the thing is BC had that time where it's like, oh, we're doing great. Bonnie Henry's the best at dealing with this, and now we're rising cases like every day around, especially the Fraser Health region, which is where I am, around this area. And it just keeps going up every single day. And they've had mandatory masks now in indoor settings. We have to wear masks. Basically everywhere you go inside, you have to wear a mask. And they're trying to restrict travel, so you shouldn't go out of your area. And you know what? And Christmas is coming here, and a lot of people have to stay within a certain amount of people. They can't go out in big groups. They got to stay within their household. So the thing is, I don't think it's not getting better. It's getting worse. And unfortunately, I kind of predict that BC is going to go into a lockdown before this is all over. So, that's basically the case up here.
Jim, what do you got? I know you're in Canada too. Is it similar to what Matt is saying in your area?
Yeah, it's gotten worse. In the last week or so, they've shut down a lot of stuff. Now we're grouping restrictions indoors are limited to less than 10 people. You can have 2 cohorts of people that they've shut down a lot of businesses. Retail stuff is still open, but there's limits on all that sort of thing. Outside of doing what we do here, I ran an entertainment company. It's completely toast. It has been shut down for the last year because you can't do events like weddings, graduations. Any of that stuff is over. It's completely done. So I haven't had any of that work for however many months we've been doing this now. And that's going to go away for a long time. So it's gotten a lot worse. So they're just trying to curb the numbers here, which of course, World Juniors is all over Alberta and all that kind of stuff. And it's affected some of the practices there, and the teams and the players are catching things. So it's gotten high, it's gotten bad, and they're just trying to curb the numbers, but I don't think they're doing enough. They're not locking things down, but they're trying to limit certain things, but they're going to have to shut her down almost completely to just slow the numbers down. And they're just not willing to do that yet. So I don't see that it's going to get better, at least not in the near future.
Yeah, I know here in northwestern Pennsylvania, near the Ohio border, it's very similar to what you guys are saying. They're suggesting to, they said don't get together for Thanksgiving with your families. They're saying that for Christmas now. Just again, just trying to give advice, and it's not a hard, fast rule, but they say if you're going to get together that you want to get tested a couple of times, that you want to quarantine and different things like that. And then I know Pennsylvania just put restrictions on in outdoor and indoor gatherings, where I know for football, they were allowing like 5,000, 7,500 fans at the stadiums. Now it's down to under 500 again. And indoor, I think it's only 25 people for indoor gatherings. So it's a good transition to the next thing that we want to talk about here. And that's fans, because we know we want to get back to normal. Everyone wants to be able to go to a hockey game, but in this environment, we know that that's probably not going to be the case. So I want to ask you, Jim, to start out this question. Should fans be allowed at games really at any point in all of this? And then how would you determine that if, say, you had any sort of say?
Well, I don't think we're going to see fans until like May, maybe. I don't see the NHL in a situation where the league is going to start with any sort of fans. They might transition to a small number of fans in certain cities, but then again, when we were talking about in different locations, restrictions are different. So depending on where they play and what arenas they're in, you might see some fans, you might see not. I mean, the NHL, I think, is going to be looking at this in a way of, yes, they want to have people exposed to the games in person, and that's the fun part of going to a game, but the fans can still watch the game. What they're concerned about is just not playing. Right. If they don't have a way for anybody to take in the hockey, they'll find something else to do. Whether they go see it live or they watch it on TV is less probably of an issue for the NHL. But what they're really concerned about is the financial situation that comes with not having fans. Because if you don't have fans in the stands in a lot of these NHL cities, which is a hugely gate-driven league, they're in real trouble. And so many of these franchises need the fans to make any money that's where all these talks of finances and, the threats of a lockout, all that other stuff come in, right? Because if they don't have fans, they can't make the money they need to make. And when we talked about the bubble and how that worked before, the reason that it worked was because the NHL at that point didn't care about the money. They were like, we're going to do these playoffs. Doesn't matter how much we lose. We got to get them done. They knew they were going to lose hand over fist. I don't think they're going to be ready to walk into a season with no fans. So I think the plan is they want to get fans in there at some point just to save some of these markets that can have fans. But I don't think it's going to happen early. I don't see it happening in January. If it happens in February, it'll be very small. Maybe by April and May, you might see some, but I don't think in the entire season you're going to see full arenas. Not even close. If it's a 25% or a 30% capacity, some of these places, maybe. But that's probably if you're, silver lining around everything, right? Like that's got to go well for that to happen.
Yeah, Eugene, what do you think about fans? Like, how soon could we see even just a few fans in the stands?
So coming from the Florida side again, if the hockey season starts and we have a game in Tampa, the Lightning would be allowed to have fans there, as far as what I know. For example, like the theme parks, being in Florida, and we talk about theme parks like always. The theme parks are currently open, and they're currently running a limited capacity, but the capacity is set by the theme park, not by the state. I think since end of September, they've had the option to raise capacity or lower capacity at their own discretion. So essentially, the theme parks have been kind of running off the mindset of what's the minimum amount of people we need to not lose money compared to being closed. So I could see like if hockey starts on, let's say January 1st, it were to start, and we have a game in Tampa on January 1st, I could see there being 30% of fans there day one minimum. And they could probably go as much as they wanted to, because from what I could get from the state rules, they can choose their own for what they see as safe. For example, I know like the Buccaneers, our local football team, they have fans in the stadium, and I want to say it's around 30 to 40% of the stadium. That's outdoors, it's a little different, but that's about what they're running. So I'd be shocked if in Sunrise and if in Amalie, if there wasn't some fans day one.
And I'll just add to what he's saying, because I actually know someone that just got back from a trip to Disney World in Florida. And they indicated that it was 35% capacity at the time that they were there. They were able to still, they were able to take their mask off when they were able to eat and stuff like that. So they still had a great time on the trip. And they, did everything that they could to stay safe. But Eugene's right. There's some places that are open, and we might see fans in a place like Florida or even Texas. If you watch the Dallas Cowboys game, plenty of fans at that stadium. I wonder if the Dallas Stars would welcome fans. I think it's geographical is kind of where this is going. I think ultimately, a lot of places are going to start with no fans, but places like Florida, places like Texas, maybe a few other places in the country that are a little looser, they might do a phased in approach where maybe they'll welcome a few hundred fans to start, because you can easily socially distance if there's only a couple hundred fans in a 20,000 seat arena, see where it goes, or you're going to have some that are going to do none at all. So I think that you guys are right. There's just a lot up in the air right now. We just kind of have to wait and see because the virus is going to dictate everything. So Matt, do you have any sort of, do you have anything to add to the fans here? Like, I don't think we're going to see full arenas again till next season minimum. Is that what you're seeing too?
I fully agree with what's been said already, and it's going to depend on the geographical area that it's going to be in, because there are, like you said, there are some places that have looser restrictions. There are some places that have tighter stuff. Like in BC, no fans. Like it's not going to happen. And when it does happen, I think when it does happen everywhere, there's going to be a lot of stuff that you're going to have to go through to get into the arena. There's going to be to test to go in to make sure you don't have a fever. And there's going to be tests a lot to be able to go in. You're going to have to wear a mask. And there's going to be a lot. I don't know how many fans are going to, like, we all love hockey. I don't know how many fans are going to be like, well, I want to go to a hockey game, but I have to go through all this to get in. But I do foresee it getting back to normal eventually, but it's going to be a long time. It's going to be the long haul here.
One of the things I don't mean to cut you off there, Mark. One of the things that I wanted to clarify when I was saying in a lot of these arenas, no fans, is that we have to remember that hockey and football and baseball and some of these other outdoor events are quite different than the NHL and these indoor arenas, which a lot of which are not set up to properly ventilate and all that other stuff that's going to have to go along with that. And then there's probably also, and I don't know this for sure, but I would guess that in some ways the NHL is going to be a little bit more strict in terms of what they're willing to accept as, not a casualty is the wrong word, but what are we willing to be okay with if somebody comes out of this arena and isn't well, right? And so I think their higher standard is probably going to affect the ability. And when you talk about Florida and some of those franchises that really, really, really need the fans, you're right, Eugene, it's probably going to change things in terms of how willing they are to let people in and all that kind of stuff. So my thinking was that if we're looking at a January 1st or January 15th start date, you're probably going to see a lot fewer or a lot less likelihood that there are fans in the buildings.
Yep, agree with all of that. It's about 8:30 here in the East, so we're about halfway through. This is the Hockey Writers Live. This is episode number 10. Make sure you hit that like button on Facebook and make sure you subscribe to YouTube. There's going to be a surprise coming. Christmas is coming. I told you last week, if you go out and do that, there might be a surprise coming your way. So stay tuned. I might be announcing something in the coming weeks for a little bit of a prize for someone who has taken the time to subscribe and to like the page. Again, you don't want to miss anything. The shows are going to get bigger and better. And in about 10 minutes or so, we're going to have Cam Atkinson from the Columbus Blue Jackets joining in here. But for now, we got a couple more questions for the panel. So Eugene, we saw the playoff bubble. We saw how successful that was. It was incredible, the testing that they were able to do and the fact that there was no positive results in the bubble. So there is a confidence in the bubble. My question to you, though, is can a regular season bubble work? We know that the players wouldn't like it. Understand that. But if that's the only option that the NHL has at this point, will they go down that road again?
I believe if they saw it as the only option, they would look into it. I don't believe it would work because of the amount of time regular season takes plus playoffs. As a team who went all the way to the very end of that bubble, the players by the end were exhausted in ways that you are not exhausted after a normal Stanley Cup run. They wouldn't be able to take it much longer in the bubble, as far as from what I've heard and had been told. And they won the games. I can only imagine what that Dallas Stars felt losing in the end. Like I said, I don't think it would be sustainable for the league to think that a bubble is going to work for a full regular season plus a playoff.
Yeah, Matt, do you feel that a regular season bubble could work? I mean, even if it's only a couple weeks at a time, where there's regionalized bubbles that teams can go to. I mean, could you see any scenario that would work in your mind?
I think it could work in a short term type bubble where, yeah, like you said, the 2 weeks they play the bulk of games with the same teams in the bubble, and then they leave and have, some time off where they can go see their families, where they can go and get out of that isolation. Because, like Eugene said, there was a lot of talk, like Bo Horvat in Vancouver here. He said he wouldn't do it again. It was just too hard. And, it looks, and that's probably the sentiment of a lot of players, and not be able to see their families for so long. And yes, they're used to road trips, they're used to that, but they could leave the area that they were in. They weren't restricted to hotel and going through these areas that they're not in the public area. And I think that's the biggest thing that they're going to have to deal with. Is I think a short-term bubble could work. But if it's anything like a long-term, like regular season is a lot longer than playoffs. Like, it's crazy how much longer it is. And it's already a struggle for during the regular season and normal circumstances for road trips and stuff. I don't think a long-term bubble is going to ever work in the regular season.
Yeah, I think, when it comes to the bubble, I think a lot of players were really looking forward to their off days, whether it be like a trip to the golf course or a game of soccer, or, the bubbles were kind of promoted to say there's going to be stuff to do. But it seemed like that the teams that stayed longer, it just realized it just got to be a drag. So Jim, I ask you, is there anything that, if they have to go the bubble route, is there anything that can be changed or implemented to make that experience better at all?
I guess it depends on what perspective you're looking at it. Like, if it's just arena specific, what can they do around the districts or the arenas that they choose and the sections and the areas of those cities that players can have access to? I suppose there's some things in that respect. When it comes to the larger scale, like you mentioned, is the bubble continuous? Is there a breaks? Can they come in and, a short period of time and then they go out? And then that opens up the whole door to, okay, well, what do the TV deals look like? What happens when there are breaks in the season? What happens when that's a whole other conversation that I'm sure the league and the players would have to sort out. The league clearly wouldn't want. But I did read today, I think, that Gary Bettman in his talk said that's probably not even an option, that these NHL bubbles, that they agree, the league is like, we don't want to do it. Like, it's clearly we don't want to and not gonna are two different things if they have no choice. But that I think they're settled in, just like the players, is like, we can do everything. That is the absolute last resort. If we have to do that, maybe we'll look at it, but it's like the last thing we want to look at. So I don't know that they're terribly worried about how to make that more entertaining at this point, because I don't think it's in their frame of mind that they're going to do it. I just don't think that they see that as an option. Just like we're saying here, I can't imagine how it works. And I don't think the league thinks it's going to work either. It's the safest, but I don't think it's the thing that anybody wants to do.
All right. So one of the final questions that I'll throw by you guys here, as we're at 8:35, is just, are there any ideas overall? So outside of the bubble, so let's say that a season, is being planned and that they're going to get going. Are there any ideas that, would be useful? And like the example that I'll throw out there that I kind of mentioned was expanded rosters. How during the regular season you can only have 23, with waivers and stuff like that. I know in the NFL they're doing expanded rosters. Why not allow more players up? Just what happens if there's an outbreak, let's say, and maybe that way more games can be played. Again, this is just an idea, but Eugene, is there anything that you could see as an idea that the league should look at for a potential season to get going?
Honestly, start with some of the things we've already heard. The division alignments, I think, is a really smart way of handling it. For the very, very, very first thing is the idea of the Canadian division, to kind of sequence that off, have regional divisions, makes a lot of sense for travel. I think that's one of the best ideas they could do. That would be a quick implementation, relatively speaking, that would help out some of the basics to get things rolling to start.
Matt, is there anything that comes to your mind when it comes to a possible idea that could help with the season?
I really like what you meant with the expanded rosters, because there has to be players ready to go because there will be outbreaks and obviously regular injuries that are going to happen. And we still don't know if there is a date where they're saying the American Hockey League will start. But what if it doesn't? And they're going to have to have guys, ready to go. When it's usually having an AHL, they're going to have to be ready to go to come up. The expanded rosters is a huge thing. And like I said, the divisional alignments is the all Canadian division, I think, is the biggest to keep for Canada itself, because there will be less crossing the border because they're going to be playing a lot in Canada. So yep. I think the division alignment and the expanded rosters are going to those are things that probably will happen in regular season setting. I think that's the biggest thing, is the travel that's going to have to be figured out to lessen it in the end.
So Matt, I'm going to throw a question to you before I go to Jim here. You bring up a good point about the travel, and you cover a very interesting team in one sense. The Vancouver Canucks have their AHL team in Utica, New York. Now, how in the world is that going to work if the border's closed? They're halfway across North America in a different country. And I know the AHL's got start dates in mind and stuff like that, but how would that work in terms of trying to be able to get players to come back and forth? I mean, I'm sure they'll try and work something out, but boy, that's a tough one.
That's a tough one. And I've heard things about temporarily having the affiliate in Abbotsford. That's been a lot of talk in the past before the COVID pandemic. And I think everyone said, oh no, I have a great relationship with Utica and they don't want to jeopardize that. They love that relationship with the team over there. And I'm not disputing that at all, because they do. But I think it's more feasible, even in a normal circumstances, having it in Abbotsford, where they have a good arena. They had an AHL affiliate in the past. There's the Calgary Flames affiliate, which is the weirdest thing to me, having a rival team's prospects close to the Canucks. But I think that may have to happen in a temporary sense to have that travel, especially if the restrictions are still going on.
And Jim, you cover a team in the Edmonton Oilers that are in the same boat, with Bakersfield being the AHL affiliate. So what kind of talk are you possibly hearing? Are they going to try and relocate that, or what might be going on?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what they'll do. I mean, leading into that, and you were talking about the expanded rosters, I don't know if it's official, but I have read in a couple of places that a 28-man roster has already been approved, I think. So it's like one goalie, 2 defensemen, and 3 forwards, that they're going to add that to the rosters so that you have the extra skaters just in case something like that happens. I don't know if that's official or not. So, but I have read that. But in terms of the AHL affiliates and stuff like that, yeah, every team that's got an affiliate team in a different country is going to have to figure this out. And in the Oilers case, specifically when they have so many young guys on their blue line, for example, they're going to be expecting to use at least 3 to 4 of those prospects that might be bubbling up here. Evan Bouchard and Lagesson and Caleb. I mean, they're all going to get their shot in a normal season. They're going to need them. So they're going to have access to them because they have Oscar Klefbom out and all sorts of stuff. So they got a young blue line, and there's a lot of teams like that. Right. So they're going to have access to these AHL teams. And so I'm sure they're going to have to house them somewhere.
Absolutely. Well, guys, I really appreciate the time. Eugene, who covers the Lightning for us, Matt Zator covers the Canucks and covers our prospects, and Jim Parsons, our news writer, and covers the Edmonton Oilers. Boys, thank you so much for the time tonight talking about the season. We really appreciate it.
Of course.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, guys.